Introduction. Throughout history, countless inventions have pushed humanity forward. But some creations were so mysterious, so powerful, that they vanished, leaving behind only fragments, legends, and unanswered questions. These are the lost inventions that disappeared without a trace. The Tesla Turbine. In the early years of the 20th century, Nikola Tesla was already known as one of the most visionary inventors of his time. His name was tied to alternating current, radio, and wireless energy. Yet among the many inventions he worked on, one stood apart as both elegant and forgotten: the Tesla turbine. Unlike the heavy, bladed turbines that dominated industrial machinery, Tesla's design relied on smooth, flat discs stacked closely together on a shaft. Steam or compressed air entered tangentially at the edges of these discs, spiraling inward in a graceful vortex. Instead of colliding with blades, the fluid adhered to the discs by viscosity and surface tension, transferring its energy smoothly to the shaft. It was a strikingly simple concept, but one with enormous potential. Tesla called it his bladeless turbine. He believed it would revolutionize the generation of mechanical power, offering efficiency far beyond conventional engines. Its design was compact, with few moving parts. The absence of blades meant less friction, less wear, and lower maintenance. It could, in theory, run at extremely high speeds without the vibration and damage that plagued traditional turbines. Tesla saw it not only as an industrial machine, but as the foundation for an entirely new approach to energy. He envisioned power stations using his turbine to produce electricity more efficiently, and even small portable models that could transform transportation. Tesla demonstrated his prototype in 1913 and filed a series of patents. At the time, most turbines were massive steel structures with complicated shapes, optimized for large-scale steam power. His design was the opposite: small, elegant, and adaptable. Reports from those who witnessed the machine in operation described it as astonishingly quiet, yet powerful. In Tesla's own words, the turbine could achieve efficiencies of over 90%, a figure that, if true, would have surpassed nearly every other mechanical system of the age. Yet, despite its promise, the Tesla turbine never reached widespread use. Industrial interests favored the well-established bladed turbines, which were already deeply integrated into power plants, ships, and factories. Tesla's design, while conceptually brilliant, faced practical challenges. The discs required precise machining and high-quality materials to withstand the heat and pressure of continuous operation. Manufacturing costs at the time were too high, and the technology of metallurgy had not yet advanced enough to support Tesla's ambitions. By the 1920s, Tesla was struggling financially. Many of his projects went unfunded, and his turbine was left in a state of half-development. A few companies experimented with versions of the design, but they found it difficult to scale to the enormous power outputs demanded by industry. For smaller applications, the efficiency gains were often offset by practical limitations in durability. Slowly, the bladeless turbine faded into obscurity, overshadowed by more conventional machines. Today, the Tesla turbine remains a symbol of unrealized potential. Some engineers and researchers have revisited the idea, using modern materials and computer simulations to test its performance. In niche applications, such as pumps and small engines, variations of Tesla's design have been built. But the grand vision Tesla described, an energy revolution powered by his simple bladeless turbine, was never realized. The story of the Tesla turbine is not one of failure, but of disappearance. It was not disproven, nor debunked, but quietly set aside by an industrial world moving in another direction. Tesla himself believed that future generations would rediscover it, when the technology of materials and the priorities of society aligned with its potential. For now, it rests among the many inventions attributed to him that slipped away, leaving behind patents, scattered prototypes, and the enduring mystery of what might have been. The Ark of the Covenant's lost technology. The Ark of the Covenant is one of the most enduring mysteries in human history. According to biblical tradition, it was a sacred chest constructed by the Israelites under the guidance of Moses. Its dimensions were precise, its materials specified in detail. A wooden frame overlaid with pure gold, with two golden cherubim facing each other on the lid. Within it were said to rest the tablets of the Ten Commandments. But beyond its religious significance, the Ark has long been surrounded by claims that it possessed properties that seem technological in nature. Descriptions from ancient texts speak of the Ark radiating light, producing destructive energy, and striking down those who touched it unworthily. The priests who carried it were instructed to use wooden poles rather than handling it directly, suggesting that contact with its golden surfaces was dangerous. Some accounts describe it emitting a glow or even generating sounds. These details have led to speculation that the Ark may have been more than a symbolic container. To some, it appears almost as though it functioned like an electrical device, capable of storing and releasing energy in ways not fully understood. The structure itself offers intriguing hints. Gold is an excellent conductor of electricity. A wooden box lined with gold on the inside and outside could theoretically form a kind of capacitor, storing electrical charge. If the Ark truly had such a design, it may have been capable of generating or holding large amounts of static electricity. To the ancient world, such an object would have appeared supernatural. The sight of sparks, shocks, or a glowing discharge could easily have been interpreted as divine power. Whether this was intentional design or coincidence remains unknown, but the descriptions align closely with phenomena observed in high-voltage electrical systems. Legends about the Ark's abilities extend further. Some texts recount that armies carrying the Ark into battle gained an almost invincible advantage. Walls were said to crumble before it, enemies to flee in terror. Others suggest it could bring drought, plagues, or blessings depending on how it was treated. In Ethiopia, a long-standing tradition holds that the Ark was transported there and hidden, guarded by a line of priests who have kept it from public view for centuries. In other regions, stories tell of its disappearance during the destruction of Jerusalem, vanishing into the shadows of history. Despite centuries of searching, no confirmed trace of the Ark has ever been discovered. Its resting place remains uncertain, with theories ranging from hidden temples in Jerusalem to remote monasteries in Africa, or even burial beneath the sands of Egypt. Archaeological expeditions have been launched, scholars have debated its nature, and countless works have been written, but the Ark itself has never reappeared. What is left are the descriptions, often dramatic, that suggest it was more than an ordinary artifact. From a scientific perspective, the idea of the Ark as a technological device remains speculative. No physical evidence has been preserved to analyze, and much of what is known comes from ancient texts shaped by religious and cultural interpretation. Yet the consistency of the descriptions, its dangerous energy, its glowing presence, the strict rules for handling, continues to fuel the theory that it represented a lost form of knowledge. Whether that knowledge was advanced engineering, a natural phenomenon misunderstood by observers, or something else entirely, cannot be determined. The Ark of the Covenant's legacy lies not only in its spiritual symbolism, but also in its enduring mystery. For some, it represents divine presence on earth. For others, it stands as the possibility of an ancient technology that disappeared without a trace. Its story continues to capture imagination because it blends the sacred with the scientific, the tangible with the unreachable. What remains today is absence. The Ark itself is gone, its supposed powers no longer seen, its secrets sealed away. And with that absence comes one of history's most fascinating examples of a lost invention: the Archimedes Heat Ray. In the ancient city of Syracuse, during the 3rd century BCE, a story emerged about one of the most remarkable devices ever attributed to human ingenuity. It was said that Archimedes, the legendary Greek mathematician, engineer, and inventor, designed a weapon capable of harnessing the power of the sun itself. Known today as the Archimedes Heat Ray, the invention was described as a system of mirrors that could concentrate sunlight onto enemy ships, setting them aflame from a distance. Whether myth or reality, the heat ray became one of the most enduring examples of a lost invention, a concept so far ahead of its time that it still captures the imagination more than 2,000 years later. Accounts of the heat ray arise primarily from later sources, which claim that Archimedes used his knowledge of geometry and optics to defend the city of Syracuse against a Roman naval assault in 212 BCE. According to these stories, He arranged polished bronze shields or mirrors in such a way that sunlight was reflected onto the wooden hulls of Roman warships. The concentrated energy was said to ignite the vessels, forcing the attackers to retreat. While the historicity of these accounts is debated, the principle they describe is scientifically sound. Concentrated solar energy, when focused correctly, is capable of producing intense heat. Modern experiments with parabolic mirrors and arrays of reflective surfaces have demonstrated that wood can indeed be set alight under the right conditions. Archimedes himself was renowned for applying mathematics to practical problems. He designed war machines, compound pulleys, and systems for lifting and moving heavy objects. His understanding of reflection and geometry was far ahead of his contemporaries. If anyone of his age had the intellectual tools to attempt such a device, it would have been Archimedes. The idea of using sunlight as a weapon aligns with his reputation for combining theoretical insight with engineering daring. The mechanics of the heat ray, as imagined, would have required precise coordination. Dozens of large mirrors, each angled carefully, would need to direct beams of sunlight to a single target. The movement of the sun across the sky would have demanded constant adjustment. The Roman ships themselves would have been in motion, making accuracy even more difficult. These challenges have led many historians to doubt the practicality of the weapon in real combat. Nonetheless, the fact that the story persisted suggests it may have had some basis in experimentation, even if the dramatic battlefield success was later exaggerated. In modern times, the Archimedes heat ray has been tested repeatedly. Experiments conducted by scientists and engineers, as well as demonstrations on television programs, have produced mixed results. Small wooden targets have been ignited under controlled conditions, but attempts to replicate the destruction of full-sized ships have been less convincing. Factors such as weather, atmospheric scattering, and the reflective quality of ancient bronze complicate the outcome. Yet even partial success lends weight to the possibility that Archimedes explored the idea. The device may not have been a decisive weapon of war, but rather an ingenious experiment that inspired legends in later centuries. The fate of the heat ray, if it ever existed as a working invention, is simple: it disappeared. No surviving texts by Archimedes describe it directly. The accounts that remain come from later writers who may have blended history with folklore. Without physical artifacts or detailed technical descriptions, the device belongs to the realm of lost knowledge, suspended between fact and imagination. Its disappearance is not unusual. Many of Archimedes' works were destroyed in antiquity, leaving us only fragments of his genius. What makes the Archimedes heat ray significant is not only its potential reality, but also what it represents. It embodies the timeless human desire to harness natural forces for extraordinary purposes. To take sunlight, the most abundant energy source in the world, and transform it into a weapon was a vision far ahead of its age. Whether Archimedes achieved it fully or only in theory, the concept reveals a way of thinking that anticipates modern solar technologies by millennia. Today, the Archimedes heat ray remains an enduring symbol of ingenuity lost to history. It stands as an example of an idea too advanced for its time, recorded only in fragments, never confirmed, and never entirely dismissed. The legend continues because it straddles the line between what is possible and what is remembered. The story of Archimedes, the man who turned mirrors into fire, is one of those rare tales where the boundary between science and myth dissolves, leaving behind a mystery that endures with every retelling. The Stradivarius secret formula. Among the many mysteries in the history of craftsmanship, few are as captivating as the enduring enigma of Antonio Stradivari's violins. Built in Cremona, Italy, during the late 17th and early 18th centuries, these instruments have long been regarded as the finest ever made. Their tone has been described as pure, resonant, and unmatched, with qualities that have resisted replication for centuries. Musicians, scientists, and instrument makers have all sought to understand what made Stradivari's work so extraordinary. Yet despite countless studies and experiments, the precise formula behind the Stradivarius sound remains elusive, placing it firmly among the great lost inventions. Antonio Stradivari lived from 1644 to 1737, during a golden age of violin making. Cremona was home to several great luthiers, including the Amati and Guarneri families, yet Stradivari's instruments quickly rose to legendary status. His violins displayed a balance of craftsmanship, precision, and artistry that set them apart. The wood was carved with remarkable accuracy, the varnish glowed with subtle hues, and the overall structure seemed perfectly tuned to produce sound of unmatched clarity and power. By the time of his death, Stradivari had built more than 1,000 instruments, of which around 600 survive today. Each is considered priceless, not only as an artifact of history but as a living tool of music. What makes the Stradivarius secret so compelling is the fact that, in theory, violins are not impossible to replicate. Their structure is relatively simple. A body made of spruce and maple, a fingerboard, a bridge, strings stretched across, and a varnish to protect the wood. Countless makers have followed the same pattern. Yet time and again, attempts to reproduce the precise tonal character of a Stradivarius have fallen short. Some modern violins achieve remarkable quality, and blind listening tests occasionally show that even experts cannot always distinguish them from a Stradivarius. But when the instruments are studied closely, when sound is projected in concert halls, and when the subtleties of timbre are compared, the aura of the Stradivarius persists. There is a depth, a richness, and a projection that seems unique. Over the centuries, researchers have proposed many explanations. One theory focuses on the varnish. Stradivari's varnish, made from oils, resins, and pigments, is thought to have contributed not only to the instrument's appearance but also to its acoustics. Analyses of surviving violins reveal unusual chemical compositions, including traces of minerals not typically used in varnishes of the time. Some suggest that Stradivari experimented with treatments borrowed from furniture making or even from practices of preserving wood against insects. Others propose that he had access to recipes now lost, passed down in secrecy and never written in full detail. Another theory turns to the wood itself. During Stradivari's lifetime, Europe experienced what is known as the Little Ice Age, a period of cooler climate that slowed the growth of trees. The maple and spruce used for violins would have developed denser, more uniform grain patterns, altering their acoustic properties. Scientific analysis of Stradivarius violins has shown that the wood is unusually consistent, with fewer variations in density than modern timber. Some researchers believe this natural factor gave the instruments a unique resonance that cannot be reproduced with trees grown under today's conditions. Further studies have uncovered evidence that Stradivari treated his wood chemically, perhaps to prevent rot or worm damage. Residues of borax, salts, and even alum have been detected. Such treatments, while practical, may have incidentally changed the vibrational qualities of the wood, producing sound characteristics unintended yet extraordinary. If this was the case, Stradivari may not have fully understood why his instruments sounded so exceptional, but he knew how to replicate the process through consistent practice. Despite all of these findings, the complete formula remains uncertain. Every attempt to isolate a single factor, be it varnish, wood density, or chemical treatment, has failed to fully account for the legendary sound. More likely, it was the convergence of many elements: climate, material, craftsmanship, and subtle choices made by Stradivari through experience. His methods were not fully documented, and his workshop secrets, if they were carefully guarded, did not survive him. What remains are the instruments themselves, each one a masterpiece, yet impossible to reverse engineer with absolute precision. The disappearance of Stradivari's method is not mysterious in the same sense as a lost machine or vanished manuscript, but it is no less profound. Knowledge can be fragile. When passed down orally or held within the memory of a single craftsman, it can vanish in a single generation. Stradivari's sons continued his work, but none matched his level of mastery. By the mid-18th century, the Cremonese school of violin making was in decline, and the Golden Age had ended. Today, Stradivarius violins remain among the most sought-after instruments in the world. They are housed in museums, played by the finest musicians, and valued at millions of dollars. Each carries with it the enduring mystery of its origin, a reminder that sometimes the greatest achievements of human skill can slip beyond our grasp. The Stradivarius secret formula is not a myth but a reality, a set of practices and choices that once existed and then disappeared. Whether it was intentional alchemy of varnish and wood, or simply the unrepeatable genius of a single craftsman working in a unique time, it is knowledge that the modern world has not been able to reclaim. The story of Stradivarius violins shows how easily invention can be lost, even when the results are tangible and present before us. We can hold the instruments, we can hear their sound, but we cannot fully recreate the process that brought them into being. In this way, they remain not just works of art, but artifacts of vanished knowledge, belonging to the long list of lost inventions that disappeared without a trace. The Damascus Steel. Among the vanished inventions of history, few have inspired more awe than Damascus steel, the legendary metal used to forge blades in the Middle East from roughly the 3rd century CE until the 18th century. The swords and knives made from this steel became the subject of stories and legends. Chroniclers described them as blades capable of slicing through a piece of silk as it drifted down, cutting stones in half, or remaining sharp after countless battles. Whether these tales were exaggerations or not, the fact remains that Damascus steel blades had extraordinary qualities of strength, sharpness, and resilience, unlike anything produced elsewhere at the time. The name Damascus steel is derived from the city of Damascus, a major center of trade and culture in the medieval Islamic world. However, the steel itself was not produced there. Instead, it was likely forged from ingots of a material known as wood steel, originating from India and later traded across Persia and the Middle East. The master smiths of the Islamic world developed forging techniques that turned these wood ingots into blades with a distinctive watery, flowing pattern on the surface, a mark that became the signature of Damascus steel. What set Damascus steel apart was its combination of hardness and flexibility. Most steels are either hard but brittle or soft but tough. Achieving both qualities in one blade requires a precise balance in the microstructure of the metal. Somehow, Damascus smiths mastered this balance. Their swords could hold a razor edge without shattering under stress. The unique properties came not only from the raw material but from a forging process that has since been lost. Modern metallurgists have studied surviving Damascus blades with great care. Microscopic analysis has revealed structures known as carbon nanotubes and cementite nanowires embedded within the steel. These features are extraordinary, because they give the metal a combination of strength and elasticity that modern scientists only rediscovered in the 20th century. For centuries, the blacksmiths who produced Damascus steel were unknowingly working with nanostructures that science had no language to describe. This discovery suggests that the smiths may have used specific heating and cooling cycles that allowed such structures to form naturally, though without conscious knowledge of the underlying chemistry. The key material, wood steel, was produced in southern India using crucible methods that involved melting iron with carbon-rich materials, such as plant matter in sealed clay containers. This process introduced high amounts of carbon into the iron, creating a steel with unique properties. The ingots were then traded to the Middle East, where skilled smiths transformed them into blades. The forging process involved carefully controlled heating, hammering, and cooling, shaping the microstructure of the steel. The exact techniques were never written down in full detail and were likely guarded as trade secrets, passed orally from master to apprentice. By the 18th century, Damascus steel production had ceased. Several factors contributed to its disappearance. The supply of high-quality wood steel from India dwindled, possibly due to changes in local or sources or in the smelting process itself. European colonial expansion disrupted traditional trade routes. At the same time, industrialization in Europe introduced new steelmaking methods, such as crucible steel in Sheffield, which offered different advantages. The combination of these factors led to the gradual loss of both the material and the knowledge required to forge true Damascus blades. In the centuries that followed, countless blacksmiths and scientists attempted to recreate Damascus steel. Many produced imitations, some visually convincing with similar surface patterns, but none with the exact same properties as the originals. Even today, bladesmiths make so-called pattern-welded Damascus, where layers of steel are folded and twisted to create decorative patterns. While beautiful and strong in their own right, these are not true Damascus steel. The ancient metallurgical process remains unrecovered. The loss of Damascus steel is particularly striking because it represents a knowledge that was once widespread yet is now gone. For nearly 1,000 years, these blades were produced and traded across the Islamic world and beyond, reaching as far as Europe and Asia. Yet within a few generations, the techniques vanished, leaving only the surviving swords as evidence of their existence. The mystery of Damascus steel lies not in whether it existed, the surviving weapons prove that it did, but in how it was made. Was the secret entirely in the wood's ingots, in the forging method, or in a delicate combination of both? Modern metallurgy can approximate some of its properties, but the exact formula remains just out of reach. It is a reminder that scientific progress is not always linear. Knowledge can be gained, lost, and sometimes rediscovered centuries later. Today, Damascus blades are preserved in museums and private collections. They are admired not only as weapons of war, but as works of art, testaments to human ingenuity and craftsmanship. Their flowing patterns, formed by vanished processes, remain one of history's most beautiful and enduring enigmas. The disappearance of their method marks Damascus steel as one of the greatest lost inventions of the ancient and medieval world. The Lycurgus Cup Technology. Among the treasures of ancient craftsmanship, the Lycurgus Cup stands out as one of the most remarkable and puzzling artifacts to survive from the Roman Empire. Created in the 4th century CE, this glass chalice is extraordinary not for its form, but for its unique and still largely mysterious optical property. When illuminated from the front, the cup appears to be a shimmering green, resembling jade or emerald. But when light is placed inside or behind it, the surface transforms into a deep, glowing red, as though the entire vessel were filled with fire. This striking duality makes the Lycurgus Cup one of the earliest known examples of nanotechnology, though the people who made it could not have understood it in those terms. The chalice, now housed in the British Museum, depicts the myth of King Lycurgus of Thrace entangled in vines as punishment for defying the god Dionysus. The artistry of the relief carving is itself impressive, but it is the material that continues to fascinate scientists and historians. Roman glassmakers were skilled artisans, yet the optical behavior of this cup suggests a level of precision in materials engineering far beyond what was thought possible for its time. Modern analysis has revealed the secret behind its changing colors. The glass contains tiny particles of gold and silver, ground down to a scale of about 50 to 100 nanometers, so small that they interact with light waves differently depending on the direction of illumination. When light shines onto the surface, the nanoparticles scatter it in a way that makes the cup appear green. When light passes through the glass, the particles allow red wavelengths to dominate, turning the vessel crimson. This phenomenon, known as dichroism, is extremely rare in surviving ancient objects. The remarkable aspect is that the Roman artisans could not have known about atoms or nanoparticles. The process by which they achieved this effect remains unclear. Perhaps it was accidental, the result of mixing tiny amounts of precious metals into molten glass. Or perhaps it was the result of a closely guarded technique known only to a few master craftsmen, passed down in secrecy. What is certain is that no other surviving Roman glass object demonstrates this property on the same scale, suggesting that the Lycurgus cup was either unique or part of a tradition that has otherwise been lost. The rarity of the cup adds to its mystery. Glassware was widely produced in the Roman Empire, from utilitarian vessels to decorative luxury items. The techniques for coloring glass using metal oxides and minerals were well known. But the nanoscale distribution of gold and silver in the Lycurgus cup required extraordinary control, whether deliberate or accidental. It implies that artisans of the time may have had practical recipes for producing effects they could not scientifically explain. If so, those recipes vanished with them, leaving only this single masterpiece as a trace. The survival of the cup itself is remarkable. Glass is fragile, and over the centuries countless Roman works have been lost. The Lycurgus cup not only endured but retained its optical properties, which remain as vivid today as they were 1,600 years ago. Its preservation allows modern science to glimpse the sophistication of ancient technology. In the 1990s, researchers studying the cup used electron microscopy to confirm the presence of the nanoparticles. This discovery stunned the scientific community, as it showed that ancient artisans had achieved effects that modern nanotechnology would not formally recognize until the 20th century. Since then, material scientists have attempted to replicate the phenomenon, finding that it requires an exceptionally precise ratio of gold and silver and careful heating and cooling cycles. The probability of such precision occurring by accident is small, which strengthens the theory that the Romans may have had more systematic knowledge of materials processing than previously believed. The implications extend beyond art. Dichroic glass has potential applications in sensors, optical devices, and security features. Modern engineers study the Lycurgus Cup as an early example of functional nanotechnology embedded in cultural heritage. Yet despite repeated attempts, no laboratory has yet fully replicated the exact qualities of the original artifact. Its ability to change color so dramatically, with such clarity, remains unique. The disappearance of this technique mirrors many other lost inventions. Whether due to the collapse of trade routes, the fall of the Western Roman Empire, or the secrecy of the craftsmen, the knowledge did not survive into later periods. Medieval and Renaissance glassmakers developed their own innovations, particularly in Venice, but none reproduced the dichroic magic of the Lycurgus Cup. By the time its secret could have been appreciated again, the method was long gone. Today, the Lycurgus Cup is more than just a rare Roman relic. It represents the fragile continuity of human knowledge. An object that once may have been a luxury drinking vessel or a ceremonial chalice has become a window into an advanced, forgotten science. Its colors, shifting from green to red, remind us that ancient artisans sometimes stumbled upon, or perhaps mastered, techniques that remain out of reach even in the modern age. The cup endures as a singular artifact of beauty and mystery, bridging art, mythology, and materials science. It shows that the line between artistry and technology has always been blurred, and that some of the greatest inventions of history are those we can no longer reproduce. The lost technology of the Lycurgus Cup remains one of the most compelling examples of how ancient innovation can defy modern expectations, leaving behind questions that may never be fully answered. The Inca stone cutting technique. High in the Andes Mountains of South America lies one of history's most enduring architectural mysteries, the stonework of the Inca civilization. From the walls of Cusco to the fortress of Sacsayhuaman, the Incas built structures whose precision continues to astonish archaeologists and engineers. Giant blocks of stone, some weighing over 100 tons, were shaped and fitted together with such accuracy that even today, a sheet of paper cannot be slipped between them. These walls have survived centuries of earthquakes, conquests, and erosion, yet they stand largely intact, silent testaments to a lost art of construction. The most remarkable feature of Inca masonry is its seamless fit. Unlike most other ancient builders, the Incas did not use mortar. Instead, they cut and shaped massive stones so precisely that they interlocked like pieces of a puzzle. The stones often had irregular shapes with multiple sides and angles, yet each was carved to fit perfectly with its neighbors. This created structures that were not only beautiful but incredibly durable. When earthquakes shook the Andes, the stones could shift slightly and settle back into place without collapsing. The technique gave Inca buildings a resilience unmatched by many later constructions. The question that has puzzled researchers for centuries is how the Incas achieved such precision without the tools we associate with advanced stone cutting. The Inca Empire flourished in the 15th and early 16th centuries, just before the arrival of the Spanish. They did not use iron or steel tools, relying instead on harder stones, bronze, and simple chisels. They had no wheels, no pulleys, and no draft animals capable of pulling massive loads over rough terrain. Yet they managed to quarry, transport, and fit megalithic stones in ways that still defy easy explanation. At Sacsayhuaman, overlooking Cusco, walls rise in zigzagging patterns built from enormous polygonal blocks. Some of these stones weigh more than 100 tons, and they are fitted with dozens of angles. Each block interlocks with the next, creating an almost organic appearance, as though the stones grew together rather than were cut. In Ollantaytambo, another site of Inca engineering, stones were transported from a quarry across a river valley, up steep slopes, and into place without the aid of wheels. The logistics alone would have been formidable, But the exact shaping of the stones is even more mysterious. Several theories have been proposed. Some suggest that the Incas used a combination of pounding stones, bronze chisels, and patience, gradually grinding surfaces until they matched. Others believe they may have employed abrasive sands and water to smooth the stone. A few researchers propose more radical ideas, such as the possibility that the Incas discovered methods of softening stone chemically, using local plants or minerals. While no direct evidence supports this last theory, it reflects the scale of the puzzle left behind. The stone-cutting technique also reveals the Incas' profound understanding of their environment. They built in regions prone to seismic activity, and their interlocking stone architecture was uniquely suited to survive earthquakes. Spanish colonial buildings constructed with mortar often collapsed during tremors, while Inca walls stood firm. The durability of these structures is not only a testament to craftsmanship but also to engineering insight. What makes the mystery sharper is that the Spanish conquest effectively ended the tradition. The Inca artisans who had mastered the techniques were displaced, their methods interrupted and forgotten. Colonial architecture introduced European styles and methods, replacing indigenous practices. As a result, the knowledge of how the Incas achieved their remarkable stonework faded away within a few generations. No written records exist, since the Incas relied on quipus, knotted strings, for communication rather than written language. The secrets of their construction techniques were passed down orally, and with the collapse of their empire, the chain of transmission was broken. Modern attempts to replicate Inca stonework have met with partial success. Using chisels, hammers, and abrasives, experimental archaeologists have managed to shape stones with a high degree of precision, though usually at much smaller scales and with enormous effort. Yet no reconstruction has fully explained how the Incas could achieve such tight-fitting joints in massive stones across entire complexes. The scale, efficiency, and uniformity of the work remain unparalleled. The lost technique of Inca stone cutting is more than a curiosity. It represents a sophisticated blend of artistry, engineering, and adaptation to environment. It shows how a society without advanced metallurgy or mechanical tools could nonetheless achieve architectural feats that rival, and in some ways surpass, those of more technologically equipped civilizations. Today, the walls of Cusco, Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, and Machu Picchu continue to inspire wonder. Tourists run their hands along the seamless joints, marveling at the precision. Engineers and scientists study the stones, searching for clues in their surfaces, tool marks, and alignment. But the answers remain elusive. What is left is the enduring mystery of a lost invention. A technique of working stone so masterful that it has outlasted empires, earthquakes, and centuries, while its method has disappeared without a trace. The lost wax of the Benin bronzes. In the heart of West Africa, the Kingdom of Benin produced some of the most sophisticated metal artworks of the pre-modern world. Known collectively as the Benin bronzes, these plaques, statues, and ceremonial objects adorned the royal palace of Benin City and told the story of its rulers, battles, and deities. Crafted between the 13th and 19th centuries, they display astonishing detail and lifelike precision, capturing facial expressions, clothing, and complex patterns with a realism that rivals Renaissance Europe. The mystery lies not in their beauty, but in the technology that made them possible. The artisans of Benin used a version of the lost wax casting technique so advanced that its exact methods remain partly unknown, even today. Lost wax casting, also known as ciré perdu, is a technique that allows artists to create intricate metal objects by first sculpting them in wax. The wax model is coated in clay or another material to form a mold. When the mold is heated, the wax melts and drains away, leaving a cavity into which molten metal can be poured. Once the metal cools and hardens, the mold is broken, revealing the finished object. While the basic process has been known in many cultures, the level of refinement achieved in Benin is extraordinary. The Benin bronzes are not merely decorative. They are historical records cast in metal. The plaques depict the obis, or kings of Benin, as well as warriors, musicians, and scenes of court life. The realism of the figures is striking, down to the folds of garments and the elaborate coral bead regalia of the elite. Some works are so finely detailed that individual strands of hair or textures of cloth are visible. Achieving this required absolute mastery of both artistry and metallurgy. What makes the technology appear lost is not the general principle of lost wax casting, but the precision and scale with which the Benin craftsmen applied it. Modern metallurgists have studied the bronzes and found a level of control over temperature, alloy composition, and casting flow that seems far ahead of its time. The bronzes are made primarily of brass, an alloy of copper and zinc, sometimes mixed with other metals. Analysis suggests that the Benin artisans could manipulate the proportions to produce different effects, from durability to surface finish. This implies knowledge not only of artistic process but of complex metallurgical behavior. Transport and sourcing also raise questions. Copper and zinc ores were not locally abundant in Benin, meaning that the raw materials had to be obtained through long-distance trade. Historical records indicate that brass manillas, bracelet-like objects used as currency, were imported by European traders, melted down, and repurposed by Benin's craftsmen. Yet the artisans transformed these imported materials into artworks of a quality and scale unmatched in contemporary Europe. Their furnaces reached temperatures high enough to melt and refine large quantities of metal, suggesting a command of heat control and airflow that rivals early industrial methods. The tragedy is that much of this knowledge was violently disrupted. In 1897, during the British punitive expedition, Benin City was sacked, and thousands of bronzes were looted and dispersed to museums and private collections across Europe and beyond. The royal court, which had sustained the tradition of craftsmanship for centuries, was destroyed. The continuity of apprenticeship, where master casters passed down their knowledge to younger generations, was broken. While lost wax casting remains practiced in West Africa, the exact methods that produced the Benin bronzes at their peak were interrupted and have never been fully recovered. Today, scholars and artisans attempt to reconstruct the process. Experiments with local clays, waxes, and furnaces have shed light on how molds were made and metals poured. Some reconstructions come close to the appearance of the originals, but subtle differences remain. The exact texture, thinness of casting walls, and level of detail in the bronzes are hard to reproduce. It suggests that the Benin craftsmen had accumulated centuries of specialized knowledge, adapting materials and techniques in ways not immediately visible in the finished works. The Benin bronzes also highlight the fragile link between culture and technology. The technique was not simply a matter of technical skill. It was embedded in ritual, court life, and social hierarchy. Casting workshops were closely tied to the royal palace, and artisans were organized into guilds that served the Oba directly. The loss of this cultural system meant the loss of the technological system as well. The disappearance of the original methods of the Benin bronzes is thus not just a story of lost metallurgy but of cultural disruption and erasure. What survives are the artworks themselves. They are scattered around the world, admired for their beauty, but also standing as witnesses to the genius of their creators. Each plaque, head, or figure is not only an object but also the frozen result of a vanished process. The culmination of a craft so refined that modern scientists still marvel at its sophistication. The lost wax technique of the Benin bronzes remains a symbol of how human creativity can reach extraordinary heights and yet be extinguished by the forces of history. Though efforts continue to reconstruct the process, the exact touch of the Benin masters, the way they mixed their metals, the way they prepared their molds, the way they controlled fire, has disappeared without a trace. The bronzes endure as one of humanity's greatest artistic and technological mysteries, timeless reminders of a knowledge once mastered and now lost. The Han Purple Pigment. Among the many discoveries of ancient chemistry, few are as enigmatic as Han Purple, a synthetic pigment created more than 2,000 years ago in China. Unlike natural mineral pigments, which were ground from earth and stone, Han Purple was a man-made compound. It appeared in brilliant shades of violet and blue, adorning murals, ceramics, and statues during the Zhou and Han dynasties. Its use reached its height around the 3rd century BCE, most famously in the statues of the terracotta army near Xi'an. For centuries, its vivid color symbolized prestige and imperial power. Then, almost as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. By the end of the Han dynasty, the secret of its creation had been lost, leaving behind only fragments of artwork and a mystery that puzzled scientists until the modern era. What makes Han Purple remarkable is that it is not simply a dye or a ground mineral, but an artificially engineered material. Modern analysis has shown that Han Purple is a barium copper silicate, a complex compound that does not occur naturally in the Earth. Producing it required heating quartz sand with barium and copper-containing minerals at extremely high temperatures, sometimes above 1000 degrees Celsius. Achieving such precision in ancient furnaces would have demanded extraordinary knowledge of materials and fire control. The pigment's properties reveal a mastery of chemistry that seems out of place for its time. Most ancient pigments, like ochre, malachite, or cinnabar, were relatively simple to obtain. They were mined, ground, and applied. By contrast, Han Purple involved a deliberate transformation of raw minerals into a new material, a process that today we would call synthetic chemistry. This places its invention among the earliest known examples of humans creating artificial compounds for artistic purposes. Despite its brilliance, Han Purple was fragile. Exposure to light and air gradually caused the pigment to fade, turning it from a vivid violet blue to a dull gray. This instability may have contributed to its disappearance, as artisans sought more durable alternatives. By the early centuries of the Common Era, Han Purple had largely vanished from use, replaced by other pigments. The formula, never recorded in writing, slipped away into obscurity. Modern rediscovery of Han Purple began in the late 20th century, when scientists analyzed pigment samples from ancient Chinese artifacts. Using techniques such as X-ray diffraction, they identified the crystalline structure of the material and confirmed that it was an artificially engineered silicate. This finding astonished chemists, as it meant that ancient Chinese artisans had achieved a level of chemical sophistication rivaling much later periods. Even more surprising were the pigment's physical properties. Studies revealed that Han Purple exhibits unusual behavior when exposed to strong magnetic fields at very low temperatures. Under these conditions, it undergoes a quantum phase transition, effectively losing one of its dimensions and acting as though it exists in only 2 dimensions instead of 3. This peculiar property has drawn the interest of modern physicists, who study the pigment not only as a cultural artifact but also as a material with applications in quantum science. Yet the practical details of how the pigment was first discovered remain unknown. Did artisans stumble upon it while experimenting with glazes for ceramics? Did alchemists deliberately seek to create new colors for ritual or artistic purposes? Without written records, these questions have no certain answers. What is clear is that, once discovered, the technique spread within a relatively limited circle of workshops, likely associated with the imperial court. Its decline may have been tied not only to its fading properties but also to the collapse of the social structures that supported its production. The mystery of Han Purple lies in both its sophistication and its disappearance. Ancient China achieved a material innovation that would not be fully understood until modern science, and yet within a few centuries the knowledge was gone. The pigment's fragility meant that its brilliance could not endure in the same way as mineral-based colors, and the tradition of making it died with the craftsmen who held the secret. Today, the remnants of Han Purple are carefully preserved in museums, their faded shades still carrying echoes of the ancient brilliance. Scientists continue to study the pigment, not only to understand the past, but also to explore its strange quantum properties, which connect the ancient world to the frontiers of modern physics. The story of Han Purple reminds us that lost inventions are not always tools or machines. Sometimes they are colors, subtle, beautiful technologies of human expression. In its creation, use, and disappearance, Han Purple embodies the fragility of knowledge and the way human brilliance can flicker into existence, shine brightly for a time, and then vanish, leaving behind a mystery for future generations to rediscover. The Mithridatium Antidote. Among the most enduring legends of ancient medicine is the story of a universal antidote, a potion said to counteract nearly every poison known to humankind. This concoction, known as Mithridatium, takes its name from Mithridates VI of Pontus, the king who reigned during the 1st century BCE. Surrounded by enemies and haunted by the fear of assassination, Mithridates became obsessed with toxins. He studied them, tested them, and, according to tradition, ingested them in carefully measured doses to build resistance. From this lifelong experiment emerged a formula, part medicine, part myth, that would echo through history as one of the most mysterious inventions of ancient pharmacology. The origins of Mithridatium lie in an age of paranoia and intrigue. Kings and rulers of the Hellenistic world faced constant threats of poisoning, a weapon as subtle as it was deadly. Mithridates, aware of this danger, reportedly began consuming small amounts of venom from snakes, scorpions, and toxic plants. Over time, he is said to have developed immunity. This practice, known today as Mithridatism, entered folklore as the ability to withstand lethal substances through gradual exposure. While the biological reality of such immunity remains debated, the legend suggests a ruler so fearful of betrayal that he turned his own body into a laboratory. Mithridatium itself was a grand culmination of this obsession. Ancient writers, including Pliny the Elder and Galen, describe it as a complex preparation made from dozens of ingredients. Recipes varied, but many listed opium, cinnamon, myrrh, ginger, saffron, frankincense, gentian root, and even bits of viper flesh, mixed with honey or wine to preserve the mixture. Some versions contained more than 50 separate substances. The logic was simple yet ingenious. By blending many known antidotes and therapeutic herbs into one, the potion might protect against a vast range of poisons, whether mineral, plant, or animal in origin. What made Mithridatium so extraordinary was not only its ambition but also its endurance. After Mithridates' death, the formula was carried to Rome, where it fascinated physicians and emperors alike. Pompey, the Roman general who conquered Pontus, is said to have brought the king's recipe to Rome as a prize. There, the famous physician Andromachus refined it into an even more elaborate version known as theriac, which remained in use for more than a millennium. Apothecaries across Europe and the Middle East prepared variants of the antidote well into the Renaissance, often treating it as both a medical cure and a symbol of learned tradition. But what of its effectiveness? Could Mithridatium truly neutralize poisons? Modern pharmacologists doubt that any single preparation could counteract all toxins, yet some of its ingredients, such as opium, would indeed dull pain, while spices like cinnamon and ginger had antimicrobial properties. Myrrh and saffron were known for their effects on inflammation and mood. Even dried viper flesh, strange as it may seem, contained proteins that could trigger immune responses. Thus, while not a perfect universal antidote, the mixture might have offered real protective or therapeutic benefits, especially in an age when many poisons were actually contaminated food or infectious substances. The symbolic power of Mithridatium may have been even greater than its medical one. For rulers, possessing such a potion represented control over death itself. It embodied resilience, the ability to survive treachery when all others might fall. Drinking it was both a ritual of reassurance and a declaration of invincibility. In the courts of Rome and Byzantium, offering or withholding theriac became a matter of politics as much as medicine. To consume it was to claim the inheritance of a legendary king who had defied poison with knowledge and courage. Over time, however, the formula became more ceremonial than practical. By the Middle Ages, physicians prescribed theriac as a cure for nearly everything: plague, fevers, snake bites, stomach disorders. Apothecaries guarded their recipes, often staging public spectacles when preparing the mixture to emphasize its authority. Some batches required weeks of careful blending and months of maturation, treated more like fine wine than medicine. In Venice, the preparation of theriac became so prestigious that it was overseen by officials to ensure authenticity. Yet as scientific medicine advanced, the aura of Mithridatium began to fade. By the 18th century, doctors increasingly questioned its value, dismissing it as a superstition of antiquity. Its dozens of ingredients made it nearly impossible to standardize, and its claims of universal efficacy no longer fit the emerging framework of modern pharmacology. Gradually, it disappeared from medical practice, surviving only as a legend, a symbol of humanity's ancient dream of invulnerability. The mystery of Mithridatium lies not only in whether it worked but in what it represented. It was a synthesis of empirical knowledge and mythical thinking, a blend of real herbs and imagined protections. It reflected the human desire to conquer fear, to create a shield against invisible threats. and in that sense it was as much a psychological invention as a pharmacological one. Today, historians and chemists study surviving recipes with fascination, attempting to reconstruct the mixture in laboratories. Each attempt raises the same paradox. Was Mithridatium a marvel of early pharmacology, or a ritual of belief dressed in the language of science? Perhaps it was both. Like many lost technologies, its power resided not only in its physical effects but in the confidence it inspired. The tale of Mithridatium endures as a reminder that the greatest inventions of the past were not always machines or tools. Sometimes, they were potions, symbolic elixirs that sought to master nature's dangers. Whether effective or not, the antidote of Mithridates reflects an ancient pursuit that still resonates today. The dream of a universal cure, a protection against all that threatens life. The Philo Farnsworth's fusion device. Among the many dreamers of the 20th century, few stand out as sharply as Philo T. Farnsworth, the man credited with inventing the first fully functional electronic television. Yet beyond television, his ambitions reached much further. In the 1950s and 1960s, long after revolutionizing broadcast technology, Farnsworth turned his attention to a problem even greater: the quest for controlled nuclear fusion. His device, the Farnsworth-Hirsch fusor, promised a compact and elegant path toward limitless energy. For a time, it appeared as though one man's brilliance might unlock the power of the stars. But like so many great inventions, its promise slipped into obscurity, leaving behind only fragments of a story filled with both genius and tragedy. Farnsworth's journey into fusion began in the aftermath of his struggles with the television industry. Although his inventions shaped the modern world, he received little financial reward, often locked in disputes with larger corporations. Seeking a new field where his independence might shine, he turned toward nuclear energy. The dominant approach at the time involved massive machines, complex magnetic confinement systems, and immense budgets. Farnsworth believed there could be another way. A device small enough to fit in a laboratory, yet powerful enough to sustain fusion reactions. The fusor he developed relied on a concept both simple and daring. Inside a vacuum chamber, deuterium gas, a heavy form of hydrogen, was introduced. At the chamber's center sat a delicate grid of wires charged with a strong negative voltage. This created an electric field that pulled positively charged deuterium ions inward. Accelerated to tremendous speeds, the ions collided in the center, fusing together and releasing energy in the form of fast-moving particles and radiation. Unlike the gigantic magnetic machines, the fusor was compact, elegant, and relatively inexpensive. It was a vision of fusion made accessible. For Farnsworth, this invention was more than science. It was a lifeline. He poured his dwindling resources into the project, working tirelessly with a small team. Reports from the era describe successful demonstrations, where the fusor produced bursts of fusion reactions. Neutron detectors confirmed that atomic nuclei were colliding and fusing, albeit at levels far too low for practical energy generation. To some observers, this was proof of principle, evidence that the device worked as intended. To others, it was only a curiosity, producing fusion without any net gain of energy. Still, the promise was immense. If the fusor could be refined, if its efficiency could be improved, it might one day offer clean, abundant energy. Unlike fission reactors, it would not produce long-lived radioactive waste. Unlike fossil fuels, it would not emit greenhouse gases. In the age of the Cold War, when nuclear fears dominated the horizon, Farnsworth's device stood as a symbol of hope, a personal attempt to turn the atom's destructive force into something life-giving. Yet the road ahead proved unforgiving. Funding was scarce, and despite Farnsworth's reputation, the scientific establishment viewed his work with skepticism. Large-scale projects like tokamaks and stellarators attracted the bulk of attention and investment. Farnsworth, by contrast, worked in relative isolation, struggling to secure backing. Even when supported by private companies, his results were often dismissed as preliminary, lacking the rigorous data demanded by mainstream physicists. The fusor became known more as a clever laboratory tool than a serious path toward power generation. In the end, Farnsworth's dream faltered under the weight of financial strain and personal hardship. His health declined and he grew increasingly disillusioned. By the time of his death in 1971, his television legacy overshadowed his fusion work. The fusor, though real and functional, was left in the shadows, remembered mostly by a handful of engineers and enthusiasts. It became a story of what might have been, an invention too far ahead of its time, or perhaps too unconventional to fit within the prevailing scientific narrative. Ironically, Farnsworth's device never truly vanished. Though it could not provide net energy, the fusor proved useful as a compact neutron source. Universities and hobbyists continue to build versions of it today, sometimes with surprising success. It remains one of the few fusion machines that can be constructed outside of national laboratories, a rare example of advanced nuclear technology accessible to individuals. In this way, Farnsworth's invention lives on, not as the energy revolution he envisioned, but as a testament to human curiosity and persistence. The lost promise of the fusor lies not only in its technical limitations but in its symbolism. It represented the idea that a lone inventor, working outside the great institutions, could still make breakthroughs on the scale of civilizations. Farnsworth himself embodied that tension. A man who gave the world television, yet spent his final years chasing a vision that eluded him. To remember his fusion device is to remember both the fragility of genius and the relentless human drive to capture the power of the universe. Today, fusion research is once again at the forefront of science, with massive international projects like ITER seeking to make the dream of star power a reality. In this new race, Farnsworth's fusor stands as a reminder of a different path, smaller, humbler, but no less bold. It is one of those inventions that disappeared without fulfilling its potential, yet continues to haunt the imagination. In its quiet hum and flickering plasma, one can still hear the echo of Farnsworth's hope, that energy as infinite as the stars might one day be within reach of all humanity. The Baghdad Battery. Among the many enigmas of the ancient world, few are as captivating as a small clay jar unearthed near Baghdad in the 1930s. Known today as the Baghdad Battery, this unassuming artifact sparked one of archaeology's most enduring debates. Could this humble vessel, dating back nearly 2,000 years, have been an early form of electrical device? Or is it simply a piece of pottery misinterpreted by modern imagination? The mystery lies in the object's construction, its curious details suggesting a purpose beyond ordinary storage. The discovery was made in 1938 by Wilhelm Koenig, a German archaeologist working at the National Museum of Iraq. While examining artifacts from excavations near Kujut Rabu, he noticed a set of clay jars, each about 15 centimeters tall. Inside the jars were copper cylinders made from rolled sheets, sealed with asphalt, and fitted with an iron rod at the center. To Koenig, this combination resembled the essential components of a galvanic cell, what we would today call a battery. The design seemed strikingly modern. A copper tube acted as one electrode, while the iron rod served as the other. If the jar were filled with an acidic or alkaline liquid, vinegar, lemon juice, or fermented grape juice, a weak electrical current could be produced. In laboratory reconstructions, researchers found that the device could generate a voltage of about 1 volt. Modest by today's standards, but remarkable if created centuries before the discovery of electricity. The idea that ancient peoples might have harnessed electrical energy is tantalizing. It challenges assumptions about the timeline of technological development, suggesting knowledge far in advance of its time. But what purpose could such a device serve in antiquity? Some have proposed that the Baghdad Battery was used for electroplating, applying thin layers of gold or silver to objects. Others suggest it might have had a medical role, delivering mild shocks as a form of therapy. More speculative interpretations imagine it as a tool of ritual, its faint sparks or tingling sensations reinforcing the authority of priests. Yet skepticism remains strong. Critics argue that the jar's resemblance to a battery may be coincidental. The iron and copper components might have served other purposes, such as holding scrolls or sacred objects. The asphalt sealant could simply have been a practical way to keep the contents dry. Without clear evidence of electrical use, such as plated artifacts showing unmistakable signs of galvanic processes, the interpretation as a battery remains unproven. The debate intensified in the second half of the 20th century, when the Baghdad Battery entered popular culture. Writers of alternative history embraced it as evidence of lost knowledge, connecting it to broader theories of advanced ancient civilizations. For them, the jar symbolized a forgotten chapter in human ingenuity, a piece of proof that our ancestors may have been far more technologically capable than conventional history admits. In academic circles, however, the tone is more cautious. While experiments confirm that the device can function as a primitive battery, there is little direct proof it was ever used this way. Archaeologists emphasize the importance of context. Without written records or other corroborating evidence, the jar cannot be definitively classified as an electrical invention. It remains an ambiguous artifact, straddling the line between science and speculation. What is undeniable is the enduring fascination it provokes. The Baghdad Battery is more than an object. It is a mirror reflecting human curiosity. It invites us to imagine what might be possible if ancient cultures had stumbled upon principles of electricity. It reminds us that invention is not always linear, and that even the simplest vessel can conceal secrets beyond its surface. The artifact itself suffered from the turmoil of history. The original batteries, once housed in the National Museum of Iraq, were damaged and looted during the conflicts of the early 21st century. Today, replicas and reconstructions preserve their legacy, allowing researchers to continue testing their properties. The originals, however, remain lost or destroyed, adding another layer of mystery to an already enigmatic story. Whether or not the Baghdad Battery was truly a source of electricity, its symbolic power endures. It represents the possibility that knowledge can arise, vanish, and resurface across the ages. It embodies the fragility of history, where fragments of clay can inspire debates that span decades. And it reflects the deep human desire to connect with our ancestors, to believe that they too reached for forces beyond their grasp. In the end, the Baghdad Battery may never reveal its full story. It sits at the boundary between invention and accident, between function and interpretation. What remains certain is its place among the great lost technologies of the ancient world. A clay jar whose mystery continues to hum quietly through the centuries, much like the faint current it may once have carried. The Chinese earthquake detector of Zhang. In the annals of ancient science, few inventions stand out as vividly as the earthquake detector designed by Zhang, a polymath of the Eastern Han dynasty in the 2nd century CE. At a time when most civilizations relied on observation of the skies, Zhang looked instead to the ground beneath his feet. He built a device so advanced in concept that it seemed to anticipate the science of seismology by nearly 2 millennia. Though the original instrument has long been lost, its memory endures as one of the most intriguing examples of ancient engineering. Zhang was a remarkable figure, an astronomer, mathematician, engineer, poet, and inventor. His interests spanned the heavens and the earth, and his curiosity extended to the invisible forces that shape the world. Living in an empire often shaken by earthquakes, Zhang sought a way to detect them with greater accuracy. In 132 CE, he presented to the imperial court a device called the Hofeng Didong, literally instrument for measuring the seasonal winds and the movements of the earth. Descriptions of the detector reveal a design both elegant and symbolic. At its core was a large bronze vessel, shaped like a barrel or urn, nearly 2 meters in diameter. Around its surface were mounted 8 dragon heads, each facing outward in a different direction: north, south, east, west, and the 4 diagonals. Beneath each dragon's mouth rested a bronze toad, its mouth open to receive whatever might fall. Inside the vessel, hidden from view, a complex system of levers and pendulums was thought to respond to vibrations in the earth. When an earthquake occurred, the mechanism would tip, causing one of the dragon heads to release a small bronze ball. The ball would drop into the waiting mouth of a toad, indicating the direction from which the tremor had originated. The beauty of the design lay not only in its functionality but in its symbolism. Dragons and toads were potent creatures in Chinese cosmology, embodying the relationship between heaven, earth, and the unseen forces of nature. To see a dragon release a ball into a toad's mouth was both a scientific measurement and a ritual performance, binding knowledge to meaning. Accounts from the time suggest that the detector worked with remarkable precision. Historical records describe one famous instance in which the device released a ball, signaling an earthquake to the west. Yet no tremor was felt in the capital city. Weeks later, a messenger arrived reporting that an earthquake had indeed struck far to the west, confirming the instrument's accuracy. For the court, this was proof of Heng's genius, a machine that could sense what human perception could not. Modern historians and engineers have long debated how the device might have functioned. Some reconstructions imagine a pendulum suspended within the vessel, sensitive to the slightest tremors, triggering a release mechanism in the appropriate direction. Others propose variations involving mercury or weighted rods. While the exact mechanism remains uncertain, the concept of directional detection was astonishingly advanced. Even in the 19th century, when Western scientists first developed seismographs, few could imagine that such an idea had already been realized in antiquity. The fate of the original Hofeng Didong-yi is unknown. Like so many inventions of the ancient world, it disappeared over the centuries, surviving only in texts. Later dynasties attempted to reproduce it, but no reconstruction has ever been universally accepted as definitive. The device exists today as both a scientific puzzle and a cultural legend, hovering between documented reality and the imagination of engineers. What makes Heng's earthquake detector so compelling is not only its ingenuity but its vision. It reflects a way of thinking that treated natural forces as knowable, measurable, and predictable, an approach that lies at the very foundation of science. At a time when earthquakes were often seen as signs of divine anger, Heng proposed an instrument to study them. In doing so, he transformed fear into knowledge, turning invisible tremors into observable events. The legacy of the device has continued to inspire. Modern replicas, built by scholars and engineers, demonstrate that such a mechanism was indeed possible. These reconstructions, though speculative, show how a simple pendulum could trigger levers aligned to 8 directions, allowing a bronze ball to drop from the correct dragon's mouth. While the details may never be fully known, the principle remains clear. Heng had envisioned and possibly built one of the earliest scientific instruments for studying the Earth's hidden forces. In the end, the earthquake detector of Heng is more than a lost invention. It is a symbol of how human ingenuity can reach across centuries. It stands as proof that science is not the property of one culture or one age, but a universal impulse. The desire to understand, to measure, to transform mystery into meaning. Though the original bronze urn no longer exists, the idea it carried still resonates, like the faint echo of tremors beneath the earth, reminding us of the ancient mind that first sought to listen to the silent movements of the ground. The Shroud of Turin Radiocarbon Anomaly. Few artifacts have stirred as much debate, devotion, and scientific inquiry as the Shroud of Turin. This linen cloth, bearing the faint image of a man who appears to have suffered crucifixion, has for centuries been venerated by many as the burial shroud of Jesus Christ. Whether regarded as a relic of faith or a masterpiece of medieval art, the shroud continues to captivate imagination. But beyond questions of its origin lies a particular scientific mystery: the radiocarbon anomaly. When subjected to carbon dating in the late 20th century, the shroud yielded results that placed its age in the medieval period. Yet the story did not end there. Instead, those results became the beginning of a new enigma, one that lingers at the intersection of science, history, and unresolved possibility. The shroud first rose to prominence in the 14th century, when it appeared in France. From the beginning, its authenticity was debated. Some saw in its image the miraculous imprint of Christ, while others dismissed it as a clever forgery. For centuries, the cloth was safeguarded, moving eventually to Turin, Italy, where it remains today. Devotion persisted, but so too did skepticism. It was not until the modern era, with the advent of radiocarbon dating, that scientists could attempt to settle the question. In 1988, a small portion of the fabric was carefully removed and distributed to 3 laboratories, in Zurich, Oxford, and Tucson, for independent analysis. The results, published later that year, appeared unequivocal. The shroud dated between 1260 and 1390 CE, squarely within the medieval period. To many, this seemed to resolve the matter. The shroud was not an artifact of the 1st century, but a creation of the Middle Ages, possibly produced for devotional or ceremonial purposes. Yet the clarity of the conclusion soon gave way to controversy. Critics pointed out that the tested sample may not have been representative of the entire cloth. Some argued that the section chosen had been subject to repairs in later centuries, woven with newer threads after fire damage in the 1500s. If so, the carbon date would reflect the repair rather than the original fabric. Microscopic studies conducted afterward suggested the possibility of such contamination, with traces of cotton fibers and dyes inconsistent with the rest of the linen. Other anomalies deepened the mystery. Chemical analyses revealed unusual concentrations of vanillin, a compound that normally degrades over centuries, suggesting that the linen might be older than the radiocarbon results indicated. Additional tests using methods outside radiocarbon dating, such as spectroscopy and pollen analysis, produced conflicting interpretations. Some researchers detected pollens traceable to plants native to the Middle East, consistent with a much older provenance. Others highlighted the extraordinary qualities of the image itself, which has resisted definitive explanation by modern science. For those who believe in the shroud's authenticity, the radiocarbon results are seen not as final proof but as part of a puzzle. They argue that the cloth may have been subjected to environmental factors that altered its carbon content. Exposure to smoke from fires, microbial growth, or contamination from centuries of handling. The shroud survived at least 2 major fires, and such events could have introduced carbon from later periods, skewing the results. Proponents of this view emphasize that while radiocarbon dating is powerful, it is not infallible, especially with samples of complex history. On the other side, skeptics maintain that the simplest explanation is still the strongest. The shroud is a medieval artifact, remarkable but not miraculous. They argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the burden of proof rests with those who challenge the radiocarbon findings. To them, the anomaly lies not in the science, but in the reluctance to accept its implications. What makes the shroud's radiocarbon anomaly so compelling is the persistence of doubt. Decades after the tests, the debate continues, fueled by new analyses and ongoing fascination. Proposals for retesting the cloth have been raised, though access is tightly controlled by the custodians in Turin. Until broader studies are conducted, the question remains suspended between certainty and mystery. The Shroud of Turin is more than a piece of cloth. It is a canvas of human longing, a symbol onto which generations have projected faith, skepticism, and curiosity. The radiocarbon anomaly reminds us of the limits of science when confronted with objects that carry immense cultural and spiritual weight. In the end, the shroud may never yield a definitive answer, but perhaps that is part of its enduring power, to stand at the threshold between history and belief, between measurement and mystery, quietly resisting final judgment. The Great Pyramid Energy Hypothesis. Among the wonders of the ancient world, none commands such enduring fascination as the Great Pyramid of Giza. Rising from the desert sands with monumental precision, it has stood for over 4,500 years, an eternal sentinel of human ingenuity. Most historians see it as a tomb, built to honor Pharaoh Khufu. Yet beyond the mainstream view, a different interpretation lingers at the edges of scholarship, the Great Pyramid Energy Hypothesis. This idea suggests that the pyramid was not merely a burial monument, but a sophisticated energy device, engineered to harness and channel natural forces in ways still not fully understood. The hypothesis first emerged in modern times as researchers and alternative historians noticed peculiar features of the Great Pyramid. Unlike most pyramids, it contains no elaborate inscriptions, no ornate decorations, and, crucially, no confirmed remains of a pharaoh. Instead, its inner chambers and shafts suggest a structure with functional rather than purely symbolic purpose. The precise alignment of the pyramid to true north, the exactness of its proportions, and the mathematical constants embedded within its design sparked speculation. Could the pyramid have been more than a tomb? Some proponents argue that the pyramid acted as a giant resonant energy machine. According to this view, the layout of the chambers and passageways allowed vibrations from the earth itself to be amplified and converted into usable energy. The so-called King's Chamber, constructed from massive granite blocks, is thought to have resonant properties, capable of sustaining powerful acoustic vibrations. The shafts leading outward may have functioned as conduits, channeling energy or even electromagnetic waves. In the late 20th century, studies using seismographic and acoustic instruments revealed that the pyramid does indeed produce unusual vibrational effects. When sound is introduced at certain frequencies, the chambers resonate in ways that amplify and sustain the tones. Some researchers see this as evidence that the pyramid was intentionally tuned, designed with harmonic principles in mind. While mainstream Egyptology attributes this simply to architectural happenstance, the energy hypothesis holds that the builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of acoustics. Beyond acoustics, others suggest the pyramid may have interacted with electromagnetic energy. Granite, used extensively in its core structures, contains significant amounts of quartz, a material capable of generating electric potential under pressure, a property known as piezoelectricity. Combined with the pyramid's shape and orientation, some theorists propose it could have concentrated natural electrical fields, producing energy that might have been transmitted wirelessly or used in ways now lost to history. Skeptics, however, caution against reading too much into these ideas. They point out that while the pyramid's geometry is extraordinary, there is no direct evidence that it was intended as a power plant. The absence of ancient records describing such a purpose leaves the hypothesis speculative. For mainstream archaeology, the pyramid remains first and foremost a royal monument, with its engineering marvels explained by the ambition and religious devotion of Khufu's era. Yet the persistence of the energy hypothesis reveals something deeper. For many, the sheer scale and precision of the Great Pyramid seem to exceed what could be achieved with Bronze Age tools and techniques. Its alignment with celestial bodies, its mathematical harmonics, and its endurance through millennia invite the imagination to reach beyond conventional explanations. Whether or not it was an energy device, the pyramid embodies a sense of purposeful design that resonates with modern ideas of technology. In recent years, advanced scanning techniques have uncovered mysterious voids within the pyramid, large, unexplored chambers hidden behind layers of stone. Their function remains unknown. To believers in the energy hypothesis, these voids may hold clues to a forgotten technology. To conventional scholars, they are likely structural features that helped distribute weight. Still, their discovery adds to the aura of unanswered questions surrounding the pyramid. The Great Pyramid energy hypothesis stands, ultimately, at the crossroads of archaeology and imagination. It reflects humanity's desire to see in the past not only echoes of ritual and death, but also glimpses of knowledge that might have rivaled, or even surpassed, our own. Whether the pyramid was a tomb, a temple, or an energy machine, it continues to inspire awe. In its silent geometry, some perceive the possibility of lost science, a vision of an ancient world that harnessed forces we are only beginning to rediscover. Perhaps the truth lies not in choosing between tomb and power plant, but in acknowledging the pyramid as a symbol of human mystery. Its stones do not speak, but they hum with resonance, a resonance that may be literal or merely metaphorical. Either way, the Great Pyramid reminds us that the line between technology and monument, between science and ritual, is not always clear. And in that uncertainty, the pyramid retains its greatest power, to awaken wonder. Ending. Thank you for watching this journey through the mysteries of lost inventions. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with friends who love history and hidden knowledge, and keep the conversation alive in the comments with your own thoughts.